I now have $110,000 to spend. If I have $110,000 to spend, I give to this gentleman here, he now becomes creditworthy. He has 10% credit. He now has $121 to spend. It goes on and on and on. So when credit is available and money is available, it accelerates the growth of an economy. When it doesn't, it shrinks the economy. Not very complicated. Don't be confused by this. The first 5 minutes of this thing, I'm thinking, because it's animated, it's stick figures, all that kind of stuff. I'm blowing it off. I'm not. All of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I catch it. I have to go back to the beginning and watch it again. I've watched it like 5 times. It's absolutely fabulous. It's how he has managed his hedge fund over the years in looking for opportunities. Okay, so I think that's a relatively important aspect. My third chapter of the book, the second chapter of my book, I'm kind of big on old statements. You know, I tell my kids all the time, if the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, chances are the water bill's higher. One of the things that, one of my favorite statements is that some people are born on third base and they go through life thinking they hit a triple. My title of the second chapter is, I wasn't born on third base. And so the third chapter is actually a study of demographics, and here's where everything really gets exciting. When you get really excited in the study of demographics, just by chance, and I'll get to my slides in a little bit, but I'm kind of trying to set the stage. Anybody see the Sunday Denver Post by Jonathan Clement? It says that demographics may cut stocks returns. Yep. Dead wrong. Got the information wrong. You get too. He did. He got the information wrong. What he looked at, and look, he quoted, I didn't read Bob Arnott's study. You know, Bob Arnott from Research and Affiliates, a really bright guy, right? Came out with fundamental indexing and all that stuff. Great writer, great researcher. I don't know if he quotes his study. I didn't read the study. I'm assuming he got it wrong. But what he looked at, and he said, listen, people are getting older. They're going to spend less. They're going to go into retirement, and they're not going to stay invested. So what we had was a tailwind for all these years in the equity markets, but because of that demographics, we're going to have a headwind. A couple things about that. There's a couple things that are wrong about that. In the next 20 years, the greatest transfer of wealth is going to take place in this country. Next 20 years. Where's that wealth going to go? Besides some of it to the federal government. It's going to go to the children, right? The children are going to have, what are they going to do? I know what they're going to do because I see it every day. I've been doing this 29 years. They buy a new car, they buy a second home, and they invest what's left over. That's an economic stimulus. That's what's going to take place. That's the first thing that's wrong. I got an interesting little thing. I was very, like I said, I've been beneficial of seeing some great people speak. And I saw a speech given by a guy named Mark Zinder, the former Director of Communications for Franklin Templeton Funds. He's on his own now. But he used to, in the later years of Sir John Templeton's life, he was his personal spokesman. Wouldn't you like tapped into that brain? And he did a speech on demographics. And he says, listen, give me the 4 countries that have the largest, oldest, aging, baby booming populations. Who's number 1? Anybody? United States. Close. United States is number 1. Japan's number 2. That's a great answer, by the way. Japan's number 2. Number 3 is a continent. European Union. Who's number 4? China's a great answer, but do you believe it or not, we don't know for sure, but according to my friends at Franklin Templeton, the average age of someone in China is 19. So it's not the aging, it's a big population, but they're young. You know what the answer is? It's the United States. The baby boomers' babies, those kids born from 1984 to 2002. There's 80 million of them. There's 76 million baby boomers left alive. Holy cow, is that going to have an impact? Now let's look at the baby boomers first. What did they experience? We're all affected by what we went through in life, right? So we're affected by what our parents experienced. The baby boomers saw their parents go through the Great Depression, they had World War II, all these types of things happened. So when they got out, they didn't start investing money right away. And they were very frugal. They didn't start spending money. Zinder says there's 4 groups in these demographics. There's the learners, 0 to 25. 25 to 35, you're a yearner. You're making money, you want stuff, but you don't have enough money yet. 35 to 65, you're an earner. You earn tons of money. And 65 on, you become a burner. Pretty easy to remember. I like stuff like that. I can figure it out. What happened to that baby boomers? They were really burned. They didn't start investing money. They didn't start spending money. They didn't start doing anything until they were 35. Take 1946, the beginning of the baby booming generation, add 35 to it. What do you get? 1980s. What happened in the 1980s to 2000? The greatest bull market the United States has seen. Okay, now let's do something different. Let's go back. Let's take the baby boomers' babies. 1984 to 2002. They're different. They saw their parents' 401ks become 201ks. They aren't investing money right now. They saw their aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters' home values go from $500,000 to $250,000 in different parts of the countries. They aren't buying real estate. There's tons of building. Now, I live in Arvada. About 70% of all the home building that's taking place in Denver is happening in Arvada. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff going up there. But generally, what are we building? Apartments all over the country. We know why? Because we haven't built any apartments since the 1980s. Because everybody could qualify for a home loan. And everybody who wanted one got one. But all these little Generation Ys, all these guys, the baby boomers' babies, are buying apartments. Interesting thing. They aren't investing money, but they aren't savers either. What are they doing? They're spending money on technology. They've already had an impact in the economy. Take 1984, add 25 to it, you get 2009. 2009, in my opinion, started the greatest bull market that we're ever going to see. And the greatest bull market the United States is going to see. Now, what did well since 2009? I mean, really well. Stuff we never would have thought of, right? Google, Apple, Netflix. I have kids in that age group. They're on Netflix all the time. So we have these things that are taking place. They've already had that impact. They aren't going to start buying houses yet, but they will when they turn 35. And that starts in 2019. 2019, we're only building about a third of the number of houses we're going to need. 2019 is going to start some really cool stuff in housing. I'm telling you, I'm still bullish. I think we're in a secular bull market. This is just my opinion. I think we're in a cyclical cycle of that secular bear. So I think we're probably in the 6th or 7th inning, and I'll give you reasons why real quick here, on why I think we're there. Then we'll go through the slide, and we'll go through all that stuff. But I think it's going to be unbelievable. The other thing you got to look at is what's happening with the super cycle. And now, super cycle is when the entire world prospers. The first super cycle was 1884 to 2007. 2014. 1884 to 2014, first was the Industrial Revolution. World GDP went to 1% to 2%, it doubled. The United States went from nowhere on the map to near the top. Okay? Then there was no super cycle, because what did we have? We had World War I, we had the Great Depression, we had World War II. Real tough time. 1946 started the greatest super cycle we've ever seen. The entire world prospered. War was over. We rebuilt Europe, we rebuilt Japan, and now all of a sudden we're not making bombs, we're making refrigerators and automobiles. That lasted all the way to 1973 until the Arab oil embargo came in. When the Arab oil embargo came in, all of a sudden we didn't have the growth that we thought we would have. It stopped. There was no super cycle until 2000. According to, this is from the Standard Chartered Bank of England, 75% of their business is in the emerging worlds. Okay? So they know it pretty well. The interesting thing about this is, we think about the 1980s and 90s in the United States that things were so fabulous. But remember, go back and look at the international markets. They averaged about 4.5% returns. The United States had all the gains. It wasn't a super cycle. Their contention is the greatest super cycle in the world started in 2000, and it started in 2000 because of several things. In the past 100 years, about 67, 68% of world growth came from 18% of the world's population. That was Europe, Japan, the United States. In the future, 60% of the world's growth is going to come from 85% of the world's population. That's the emerging world. Interesting thing happens with capitalism. It takes people out of poverty, makes them middle-class consumers, even in a communistic society. It's unbelievable, the power of capitalism. So we're going to see that all over the world, that we're going to see this next super cycle. They're predicting, for instance, Brazil is going to go from 2 trillion to, I'm going to say it's 6 trillion. They predict China is eventually going to be around 70 trillion. They predict we're going to be around 30-some trillion. All these things in the future, in the 2030 and beyond. I may be a bit optimistic, but that's what they have on their numbers. So it's a situation where that's coming. When you add that all together with demographics and the opportunity of consumption around the world, it's going to be a great time. And they can't do without the United States. Because our saving grace is a couple of things. First of all, do I think there's bubbles out there? I do. I grew up in Iowa. I grew up in Sioux County, Iowa. Fortune magazine ranks Sioux County, Iowa as the 5th wealthiest county in America. Farmland's going for $20,000 an acre. That's a bubble. Because guess what? When we pull away ethanol, which we're going to pull away, because we have such vast resources in oil and gas that we're moving towards energy independence, it's going to hurt those farm prices. To me, agricultural land in the short run is a bubble. In the long run, it's a pretty good deal. But in the short run, it's a bubble. So there are some things out there like that. So if I haven't forgot anything, let me pop onto the slide and go from there. And we'll see what we got going on. Now I have to go over here to hit the button. If I hit the right button, we'll be in good shape. If I don't, the presentation will be over. We can all go home. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ask them. Other people may have them as well. I talk fast, so we'll kind of go through that. The biggest one-year jump in U.S. average daily oil production occurred when? 2013, 7.5 million. We increased 1 million barrels of oil a day. 7.5 million. We consume about 18 million, so we're getting there. You remember about 5 years ago or 10 years ago? If all of a sudden Iraq and Iran were kind of bubbling up, if Russia going into Ukraine, what would have that done to our economies? It would have freaked us out. Guys, we're heading to energy independence. This is such a great country. I got a phone call Monday from a young man who was referred to me down in Texas. He's the vice president of drilling of a small oil company that became a big oil company. When he took it over, they're doing about 100 barrels a day. Now they're doing 10,000 barrels a day. They just got bought out last Monday for $800 million. He called me. I think I was the third person he called. And he said, can you come down to Houston to see me? I've got some money I need to have taken care of. I said, my friend, you name the date. I'll make sure that I am there. It's a great country. He's a 42-year-old kid, high school degree. He said, I worked for 2.5 years, 7 days a week. This guy looks like a linebacker for the Broncos. He goes, I ran crews hard. He goes, I worked my tail off. He's almost crying on the phone. He's telling me this. And he did. It's a great country. 1984, I'll give you another example. I was a C student at the University of South Dakota. 2 of my other buddies were too. These 2 guys in 1984 started a little company called Mattress Firm. 1992, they sold it. And they sold it and walked away with tens of millions of dollars themselves. Really great story. Now, I didn't realize why I was a C student at the University of South Dakota, because, back in the day, we didn't have all this learning disability stuff. But as I got older, I realized I had a learning disability. Back in those days, my learning disability was known as beer and women. So I've overcome that and moved forward from there. At least I'm honest about it, right? Okay, 2013, we got that one. Let's not do that one. Let's do this. Okay. The Affordable Care Act. Anybody know how many pages that thing is? 906. Kind of hard to read. Thousands is a pretty good answer, though. Today's national debt is over 17 trillion. I'm going to focus on this a little bit. And in 1981, it was less than what? 1 trillion. Wow. Okay, do we have a headwind? Yeah, it's called the federal government, right? That's the headwind. I'm not making a Democrat or Republican statement. There's enough blame to go around everywhere, right? So we got a situation here. It's really not 17 trillion. The real national debt is over 200 trillion. It's like a balloon payment that we're not looking at. It'll just go away one day if we don't pay attention to it. It's not going to go away. We're going to face it one day. I'm going to tell you they can't tax the guy making 25 grand a year standing on the corner. He doesn't have no money. If you're in the top 5% in this country, your wealth is going to get hit. There's more money in IRAs and 401ks in this country today than there is the full capitalization of the U.S. stock market. Where do you think some of that money is going to come from? I can show you a way you can disinherit, I can't do it tonight, but you can disinherit the IRS from those assets. They get nothing if you follow practice planning procedures correctly. It's really simple. They get nothing. So we can talk about that as well one time. It's not appropriate now. Email me, call me. By the way, my cell phone number, if anybody wants it, it's 303-668-3187. You can call it any time. I am who I say I am, because guess what? I do believe that optimism is the only realism. My ringback tone is It's a Wonderful World. You know the song, Roses are red, skies are blue. So that's how I see the world.